There's a lot to learn about ancient Egypt. This civilization continues to fascinate us with its awe-inspiring monuments, arcane mythology, and otherworldly art style. But I think the remarkable continuity and stability of ancient Egypt's culture stops us from truly appreciating the incredible span of time which this civilization covered. So here I want to explain and visualize just that. The civilization known to us as ancient Egypt lasted for about 3,000 years, from the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt around 3100 BCE to the Roman conquest in the year 30 BCE. Historians divide the dynastic period into three major eras, the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms. Following each of these were periods of civil unrest and strife over the throne, known as intermediate periods. However, when compared to other ancient societies like those in Mesopotamia or Bronze Age Greece, even Egypt's low points were remarkably stable. Over the country's entire history, about 170 pharaohs divided into 31 dynasties would rule. Back to the beginning, Egypt was first united by a pharaoh called Narmer. A king from the south, Narmer swept northwards to conquer Lower Egypt and rule the entire Nile Valley. The symbiotic duality became very important in the minds of Egyptians and in the language of rulership for the next 3 millennia. The first monumental stone structure built in Egypt came 400 years later under the reign of King Netjerikhet, also known as Djoser. This pyramid step design was an evolution of the so-called mastaba tomb chapel. The entire complex is built of stone which is carved to resemble wood, reeds, and other organic materials. Imhotep, the architect responsible for this wonder, couldn't possibly have imagined what would follow. The beginning of the 4th dynasty marked the golden age of pyramid building. Seneferu started the craze, building 3 pyramids in his lifetime. It was under his son Khufu that the Great Pyramid of Giza would be built. Then and now, this monument was and is an architectural marvel and one of the greatest feats of human engineering. It was constructed using only soft metal tools during a time when woolly mammoths could still be found roaming the earth. 2 subsequent kings, Khafre and Menkaure, built their own pyramids on the Giza Plateau and completed the construction of the Great Sphinx. The Old Kingdom would come to an end after the absurdly long life and reign of King Pepi II caused a succession crisis. The country split once again between 2 centers of power, Heracleopolis in Lower Egypt and Thebes in Upper Egypt. Order would be restored by the Theban ruler Nebhepet-Ra-Montuhotep II, who reunited the kingdoms after conquering the north. This marks the beginning of the prosperous Middle Kingdom period, and all of this happened at a time before the horse had even been domesticated. The most important remnant from this era is the Middle Egyptian language and the great literature which it brought. This is when the writing system of Egyptian hieroglyphs came into its own, and this period was famous to following generations as one of cultural and artistic excellence. After this, we get the Second Intermediate period, when a group of Semitic people known as the Hyksos gained a foothold in Lower Egypt, establishing their own capital at Avaris. This people group was demonized by later Egyptian writers, but they seem to have mostly assimilated into Egyptian culture, only gaining political power after the fall of the Middle Kingdom. Most notably, they introduced to the country that iconic symbol of Bronze Age warfare, the Chariot. This period would come to an end with a ruler from the south, this time Kamoza, marching north and once again reuniting Egypt, thus heralding the onset of the New Kingdom. While the Old Kingdom is well known for its monuments and the Middle Kingdom for its art and culture, the New Kingdom would become most famous for its royal intrigue and great military victories. The 18th and 19th dynasties are especially remarkable for their famous and colorful rulers, such as Hatshepsut, the female king, Akhenaten, the heretic king, and of course the boy king Tutankhamun, along with others like Queen Nefertiti and Ramses II. This era is actually when we see the first use of the word pharaoh, which comes from the Egyptian per-ah, meaning great house. During the reign of Ramses III, a group of nomadic sea peoples attacked Egypt, and the Bronze Age collapse brings down the Hittites, the city of Troy, and the Mycenaean Empire. This king would be known as the last great pharaoh of Egypt. The following Third Intermediate period is often regarded as a kind of epilogue to dynastic Egypt. From the ashes of the Bronze Age societies would arise a Persian phoenix, which swept southwestward and eventually conquered Egypt. The Persian Empire was, in turn, conquered by Alexander the Great. At his death, the empire was split, and Egypt went to one of his childhood friends and most trusted generals, Ptolemy I Soter. This succession marks the beginning of the Ptolemaic period, when Egypt was ruled from the new city of Alexandria by Greek kings and queens, the most famous of which was known as Cleopatra VII Philopator. Once this ruler took her own life, Egypt would be conquered by Rome and would not govern itself again for almost 2,000 years. This was only a brief overview of the major events of ancient Egyptian history. What is truly remarkable is how long this civilization lasted and how long ago. To put things into perspective, Cleopatra lived closer to the moon landing than she did to the construction of the Great Pyramid. By her lifetime, this monument, still covered in white limestone and capped with a gold pyramidion, was over 2,500 years old. Over the course of Egypt's long history, the first empire rose and fell under Sargon of Akkad. The first of China's 83 dynasties were founded. Hammurabi of Babylon composed his famous law code. The Minoan civilization dominated the Aegean until their fall to the Mycenaeans. The Trojan War occurred. Assyria was conquered. The Old Testament was written and compiled. Classical Greece experienced its heyday until being absorbed by the Macedonians, and the Roman Empire emerged onto the scene. I say all this to help restructure the way we think about ancient Egypt. Though we may talk of the Middle Kingdom, for example, by this time practically no other famous ancient societies had even come into being. Ancient China, Assyria, Greece, Israel, not even the oldest Mesoamerican civilization, the Olmecs, existed by this point, let alone the famous empires of late antiquity, like the Hellenistic, Persian, or Roman empires. Throughout all of this, Egyptian culture remained rather stable. The same rectilinear style of sculpture dominated, the same basic form of autocratic government stayed put, and even the hieroglyphic writing system didn't change much. This degree of cultural continuity and consistency over such a long period of time is what makes Egypt truly unique. Even when the Nile Valley was conquered by the Hyksos, Nubians, Persians, Greeks, or Romans, it was the conquerors who took on Egyptian customs and culture. In a previous video, I explained how the natural environment of ancient Egypt affected the psychology and religious thought of the Egyptians. Basically, the rather calm and predictable annual flood of the Nile and the bountiful harvest which it brought caused the Egyptians to develop religious beliefs intensely focused on the dichotomy between order and chaos. This type of belief system was also no doubt advantageous to the ruling elites of the country. When we look at surrounding areas like Mesopotamia, we see empires, languages, and entire civilizations rising and falling like clockwork. In fact, the volatile nature of the Tigris and Euphrates led to the Mesopotamians viewing their gods as capricious and emotionally unstable. Thus, no culture was able to singularly dominate Mesopotamia for several millennia. This was not the case with Egypt. The calm predictability of Egyptian cultural and historical developments mirrors the calm predictability of the Egyptian way of life, which was focused on the Nile River. In no way should this continuity take away from the interest you may have in ancient Egypt. After all, even the ancient world's most prideful leaders respected the long-established traditions of Egyptian culture. I think we too can learn to appreciate and find the value in what the Egyptians kept the same for over 3,000 years of their history.